morning, ladies and gentlemen, and hello. My name is Ashley Nicholson and I'm the Marine Director here at the Port of Tyne. I am delighted to be here this morning to welcome you to this morning's event at the Innovation Hub on our Port of Tyne estate. Please excuse my throat, it will croak on the way through. It's just running out of air at the minute. I'd like to thank our guests in the room and to our audience online for making the effort to come today to hear about our exciting project. And I'm sure you'll agree it'll be an exciting couple of hours hearing from our speakers today. For those in the room, let me kick off first by starting with some quick housekeeping rules. There are no planned tests of our fire system today, so if the alarm does sound, please exit the building using the fire exit here on your left-hand side and follow the other green signs which will take you to the fire exits. Your bathroom facilities are back in the main entrance that you've joined today from, so if you go back to the main door you came in, there were some toilet facilities back there that you're free to go and use at your leisure. No toilet passage required. I'm sure as well you'll agree that that really poor version of instructions is why I absolutely would not have made the cut for cabin crew. So we'll move swiftly on to today's event. So you're here today to hear about the Clean Tyne Project. It's a really exciting project that's created a blueprint for decarbonisation, not only at the port here on the Tyne, but for ports across the wider UK. Today, our speakers will come to you from the representations of the project partners, and through each of the presentations, we'll hear in a bit more detail about how the project will help the Port of Tyne decarbonise, but also how that can then be rolled out to the wider maritime industry and beyond. Following on from the presentations today, our panellists will finalise the day with a panel session. Please do encourage you to take note of questions that you might have and log them on the Slido facility. We're using Slido today to log, and our facilitators will manage all the questions for our panellists. I'm encouraging you, please do engage with the speakers. They're here to be engaged with and they're here to answer your questions. So if you use the hashtag Clean Tyne, either the QR code on the screen right now or via the Slido app, which you'll get in one of your app stores, whichever mobile phone service you use. The event's expected to conclude around 11:15 this morning, and those in the room who have registered will benefit and join us on a port tour. Apologies to those who have not made it today and will not benefit from that port tour, but I'm sure if you come to us in any other event at the Innovation Hub, we'll be happy to give you that port tour, an exciting tour of our estate. First, let's start today though with a message from someone of much greater standing than myself, the Secretary of State, the Right Honourable Grant Shapps, who unfortunately was not able to join us today, but he has taken the time to record a personalised message for our event attendees today, which we'll play for you.
Good morning. Let me start by congratulating everyone involved with the Clean Tyne Project for not only seeing it to completion, but for developing a technology that will lead to more efficient, clean and profitable ports across the country. You've not just created a blueprint for what maritime must do to decarbonise, but how? Bringing together public bodies such as the Department for Transport, private sector expertise thanks to Siemens, Connected Places, Catapult and the North East LEP, academic excellence from Newcastle University, and of course the Port of Tyne itself, all working to secure a smarter and greener future for UK maritime. Now, as an island nation, maritime is very much in our DNA. 95% of our trade comes via sea, 3.8 million tonnes of it along the Tyne. Our quality of life, indeed our way of life, depends on a thriving maritime sector. And our ports, these global gateways that powered one industrial revolution, will herald the green industrial revolution the Prime Minister has called for. The Port of Tyne, after all, supports the Nissan factory in Sunderland, a factory that will soon produce 100,000 new generation electric vehicles a year. It also serves as the support port for Europe's largest offshore wind farm at Dogger Bank, a wind farm that could end up powering as many as 6 million homes. Yet, maritime itself must also go green. Shipping emits more greenhouse gases than rail and bus transport combined. Now, this government's been clear. We want zero emission shipping by 2050, with significant fleet-wide emission reductions as early as the 2030s. And this will need innovation at home and leadership abroad. And that's why Clean Tyne was one of 55 projects to receive a share of £23 million of government funding through last year's Clean Maritime Demonstration competition. And it's why we're consulting on the uptake of shore power in the UK, so vessels can turn off their engines when they're berthed. And it's why at COP26 we launched the Climate Declaration for green shipping corridors, with over 20 countries committing to work on zero emission shipping routes. So let me finish by saying that where the Port of Tyne is leading, others will surely follow. And I hope today's event leads to a wave of innovation across the sector and a reminder that only by bringing together the best of governments and business and academia can we secure maritime's future and build the greener and fairer economy that this country needs. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks to the Minister for that very encouraging message of support, and we do truly hope that the Clean Tyne Project will lead and encourage others to follow. So we did not ask for that message. That was a really powerful message the Minister did put there, and we do truly hope that it sinks in with others today. As you heard from the Minister, the project was part of the Clean Maritime Demonstrator competition, which was funded by the Department for Transport and delivered in partnership with Innovate UK. Announced in 2020, part of the Prime Minister's 10-point plan to position the UK at the forefront of green shipping and marine technology. The Clean Maritime Demonstrator competition was a £20 million investment from the government alongside £10 million from industry to help reduce emissions in the maritime sector. The programme's supporting 55 projects at the minute across the UK in research, development and design, design of developing of zero emission technology and infrastructure, with an aim to accelerate the decarbonisation of the maritime sector. The government's recent launch of the dedicated UK shore team and the £203 million commitment of funding to further progress projects such as Clean Tyne through another multi-year CMDC is really something of a powerful message from the government about how the UK really is dedicated to the commitments to decarbonise our maritime industry. We're really excited at the Port of Tyne about this project and its future potential, not just locally, but nationally, and what we think that can bring to the wider maritime decarbonisation plan. You never came here today to hear from me, so before I introduce our first speaker today, I want to set the scene a little bit for today's event with another very short video which gives a bite-sized overview of the Clean Tyne Project.
Welcome to the Port of Tyne. We've been connecting people, industry, goods and services for centuries. Now, we're setting sail on our biggest journey ever to create the smartest port of the future, introducing our mission, the Clean Tyne Project, a programme that is en route to help decarbonise the Port of Tyne and reduce energy costs, here to inspire change in the maritime industry. We're on a mission to create a cleaner, more sustainable and more effective way of working, a project that will position the North East and the UK at the forefront of green shipbuilding and maritime technology. The Clean Tyne Project has received substantial funding from the Department of Transport, delivered in partnership with Innovate UK. In order to reach the government's plan to position the UK at the forefront of green shipbuilding and maritime technology, there will be £30 million total investment in several initiatives to reduce emissions from the maritime sector. Along the way, this funding will support research, design and development of zero-emission technology and infrastructure solutions. We're excited to drive the Clean Tyne Project forward alongside international and local organisations as we strive to land net zero by 2030. Our vision is ambitious, but our goals are achievable. Pushing our real-time digital platform for scenario planning and feasibility studies is already helping to determine the future power needs of the Port of Tyne. We're progressing our understanding of the port's existing consumption and emissions by performing an energy audit, whilst continually growing our clean technology such as the electrification of shipping and logistics to help reduce CO2 emissions. But our journey doesn't stop here. We plan to lead the way. The Clean Tyne Project will help transform the industry with a blueprint for decarbonisation that can be replicated in ports across the UK. We're moving towards a better future. We are the Clean Tyne Project, and we won't stop until we achieve our ambitions.
I'm sure you'll agree it's an amazing project. And I'd like to take one last opportunity to encourage everybody here today, via digital or via our people in the room, to engage with our speakers in the panel discussion. And I am fairly confident to say that I am sure you'll enjoy the event, and I'm pretty confident that you will all agree that it's equally as interesting an opportunity as we think it is here. So without further ado, I will hand you over to the actual speakers. And the first speaker for today is Tom White, the Ecosystem Director for Maritime and Ports at Connected Places Catapult. Tom.
Thanks, Ashley, and it's really good to see you all here today in a place I've been to quite a few times, and always happy to be back. So before we dive into some more of the details about what we did in the projects across all our partners, I'm just going to give a little bit of an intro for 10 minutes of how we ended up here and why. So this is the catapult over the last 3 years, and I won't linger on it because it's obviously today is about more than what the catapult in ourselves was doing, but what I think it shows is the journey that certainly I've seen in the industry over the last few years. If we've all talked about technologies and strategies and ways of doing things, but actually seen a real step change in action over the past few months and years of transferring all our thinking and potential around new technologies into actually things on the ground. And it's also a story that I'm proud of in how we've worked with our partners across the industry, many of whom are part of this project, obviously. And why that has been really important to us, and the fantastic relationship that we've got with the Port of Tyne and the partners, is around this shared vision about what the future port is and can actually be. And really what we have is this opportunity through ports to address some of the biggest challenges that we're talking about, whether that's in the maritime sector, but also across other sectors such as heavy goods vehicles or in the rail industry, or fundamentally how we move goods and people around. And there's many parts to that vision about how we deploy technology and achieve those impacts, such as how we use data better, or the role of autonomy, or how we decarbonise port operations. But as well, ports play such a huge role in regional communities and economies. And through innovating through ports, a lot of our ambition has been around how we can actually accelerate big challenges like achieving net zero, how we can grow opportunities for UK IP to be able to export that around the world, how we can increase private investment in innovators, demonstrating things working in action, and how we can grow exploitation opportunities for all the fantastic research and development we do at all our leading academic institutions. As well, by creating all these opportunities, we're creating the chance for new jobs and new economies built up around the businesses that support those technologies and new ways of working. And by working together at ports, which are fundamentally, multimodal transport hubs with many different stakeholders involved, we have a huge opportunity to maximise the impact of investment that we make into future infrastructure and what that can achieve. So specifically on the Port of Tyne, so we've been a partner at the Innovation Hub here since I think it opened actually, but as well we've worked with Newcastle University and Siemens in different ways over the past few years, and with the LEP as well, of course. So really, when Clean Maritime was announced, we saw this huge opportunity based on all the conversations we've had and having the opportunity to bring that together with some enabling funding to actually achieve parts of that shared vision that we all have of what the future port can be, around how we really establish the digital foundations of how we actually need to understand more about the energy we use at the port and the assets and how we use them. As well, we needed clarity on future energy vectors, because we talk a lot about ports and their unique geographic position, having access to lots of different types of renewable energy, whether that's onshore wind, wave, tidal, solar, on top of warehouse roofs, things like that. But with all those variable inputs of renewable energy sources, how do you balance that and understand more about that future system? As well, when we're thinking about that grander vision of what the future port can be, maybe our energy customers are changing as well, and we need to consider that in our future road mapping. So what we've worked hard to do over the 6 months is obviously draw insight from that data across the port, understand more about our assets and how we use them, but as well think about the stakeholders beyond that. So there's obvious benefits for the port that we're going to talk about today, but how does that interact with the place-based decarbonisation plans? Who are our future energy users and how can they benefit from this? And really what this is enabling us to do really in a future that does have uncertainty in it is helping us build confidence in the things that we should invest in that will have the impacts we're trying to achieve. So over the last 6 months through COVID and global supply chain crises and just about everything you can throw at something to try and break it, the team have done an absolutely stellar job, and this is something we've seen across the other Clean Maritime projects as well. So we've been able to achieve those objectives we set out to do in establishing those future use cases. The digital foundations and the platform that Siemens have been developing, you'll see it today, it's working. We've developed that future blueprint that you heard about in Ian's video as well. And a big part of what we've been doing also is how we actually build the business case to be able to invest in these new technologies. But importantly, this is a step on a roadmap to achieving the bigger vision. So a big part of what we've done across the partners is what will we do next? How do we fully exploit what we've learned in this to achieve even greater impacts next time, and who are the friends who are going to come with us to achieve that? So there's a lot of things we've done, which you'll hear about more, but we've been using application of digital twinning technology and predictive analytics to understand more about how different scenarios are going to impact ports' energy uses. As well, we've looked at different energy vectors to build out that vision of a future port. As well, what we've been doing, as you heard in Ian's video, the blueprint is meant to help other ports around the UK, and it's one of the fantastic things about working with the Port of Tyne through the Innovation Hub, is that openness and that collaboration, which is going to be essential to achieving the objectives around the decarbonisation of maritime. As well, we've identified benefits for the ports around reduction in energy costs, reducing CO2 emissions, and identifying opportunities to develop new projects around electrification and so on and so forth. So really where we are today is exactly where we wanted to get to, which is fantastic and a real testament to all the partners in having that smart port enabling technology at its core to work as the digital foundations to an even brighter future. So I think that's it for me, and I could be handing over to Harris to hear more about specifically on the project. Super, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so thanks Tom, and thanks everyone for coming here today, and for those who are online. I'm going to be talking, I've named the presentation Newcastle University Analysis Results and Key Findings, not because I'm precious to our own work and not because it has happened in isolation, but because it covers a very specific part of a project that might have been short but cover a lot of angles. So what we focused in Newcastle is the energy side. So we've modeled, we performed an energy audit, and we've modeled energy processes, but the contrary has happened in terms of naming this Newcastle University work. It has happened in collaboration with all the other partners and with a lot of consultation along the way. So one of the things that we're most proud about in this project is the sharing of a joint vision, a joint goal throughout the project and between all the partners. So the work I'm going to be presenting is a work that we have focused on at Newcastle, but there have been lots of strands within this project covering things like business aspects, the digital twinning from Siemens, and things you're going to be hearing about the rest of the day. So what we've done and we focused on was to perform an energy audit of the port to begin with, because what we were mainly interested to see is whether and how digitalization in the port and in key port activities could help by accelerating the path to net zero. So we wanted first to establish basically what the main contributors of CO2 emissions are, map, if you like, key energy processes, and then perform an analysis where we would look into operational scenarios now and in the future where we have a digital platform deployed that could offer benefits in terms of more coordination around these processes, or even data collection and more confidence in the data we're getting from these processes. So a key thing, a key difference that we felt this project could have and could deliver was to actually map what difference it would make if we had the digital platform in the Port of Tyne to enable coordination and more confidence in this kind of operation. Now, the platform has been deployed, but what you will be seeing here is taking this a step beyond and actually predicting or forecasting, if you like, what would happen in a series of scenarios. Now, as I said, to begin with, we've started by mapping a lot of the processes that are happening and identifying the users, whether these are land-based, the users of energy, or water-based, and according to the fuel type. And we've tried to make sense of what is happening from an energy point of view in the ports and who are the main contributors of CO2 emissions. So we've come into the conclusion that a lot of the operations and, if you like, the main contributors of CO2 emissions have to do with cargo handling equipment and ships at berth. So we've done this kind of mapping process where we've quantified what it means for representative years when, for example, these diesel-powered cargo handling equipments are operating, what it means when we're relying on the energy from the grid, or what it means when ships are berthing to perform their operations. So we've mapped these processes, but we've also looked into how we could decarbonize these kind of activities. So we haven't only looked at the port, but across other ports on a national and international level, and what is being currently deployed or what is being discussed as means to decarbonize from, if you like, first of all, an infrastructural point of view, things like electrification of port equipment, use of alternative fuels, including hydrogen, or deploying renewable energy sources. And we were happy to see that a lot of these things, or most of these things, the port was already looking at and considering for their future transition to net zero. So we've tried to map, if you like, all these kind of different options that could be deployed in the port. For example, wind or solar, deploying solar panels on the rooftops of warehouses, or different types of fuel, as I said, like hydrogen, and how these could be working for the Port of Tyne specifically, and the same for marine-based energy types. So, as I said, ships berthing and connecting to the port for serving their loads, or alternative fuels when we talk about ships in the form of different types of engines. So we've performed this audit, and we found that we're estimating that ships at berth and diesel-powered cargo handling equipment are some of the most, if you like, CO2 emitting processes, accounting for 53% and 27% of the CO2 emissions on the port, respectively. So we looked into solutions that would help us decarbonize these carbon-intensive processes, if you like, and on top of that, deploy technologies that could help us relieve some of the CO2 footprint of the port, like deploying renewables, for example. So we've got these three, if you like, infrastructural big changes that we think can happen in the port, which could be electrifying cargo handling equipment, and depending on how the port would like to proceed with different scenarios, or electrifying cargo handling equipment and using shore power, or even in a more, if you like, adventurous plan, deploy a suite of renewable energy generation solutions and combine all these in terms of assets and infrastructure. Now, we have tried to suggest all of these and combinations of these and map them across the, if you like, the pathway to net zero of the port. So we've performed an energy analysis, an energy modeling of these kind of key energy processes of the port, with the aim, as I said, to demonstrate ways in which digitalization could help on the pathway to decarbonization. So we've looked into combinations of these solutions across the years and tried to assess the benefits that we could have when we deploy the energy process and the energy platform, and we start coordinating these processes or building more confidence in the data that we're gathering. So we've modeled mathematically these kind of activities, and we've studied the effect of optimal operation or more coordinated operation of these processes, using also data to reduce the uncertainty. Now, we've put these kind of scenarios, as I said, in consultation with our partners in the project on a 30, 40, 50 basis, where we're considering that the port will gradually be electrifying its key energy emitting or carbon emissions emitting assets, and mainly cargo handling equipment and shore power. And then as we go forward, electrifying even more and more assets, and on top of it, deploying solutions like renewables or energy storage to help with this kind of local energy system, if you like, coordination. At the same time, we hypothesize that with the digital platform, we will have increased capability to coordinate these assets, and we will be reducing the uncertainty around data. And this is a key thing because it will improve, as we think, both operational and planning decisions in the port. Now, we've took and modeled a big chunk of the port, capturing a large area where a lot of the energy process take place. And we've, as I said, we've been in consultation throughout that with the port and the rest of our partners. We think that this represents a good, if you like, percentage of what is happening in the port. And we've modeled both the operation of the power network, but logistics process as well, so ships berthing, loading and unloading. We've modeled these processes, as I said, on a 30 to 50 basis, and we've made the assumption that the port will be in a position to supervise and, if you like, coordinate these kind of operations to a certain degree, trying to minimize not only energy costs but also carbon emissions. We take into account network constraints in our model, so we looked into the detailed operation of how the power network will be operating, leaning a lot on a lot of previous studies that have happened in the port, and we take into account a lot of operational constraints that not only have to do with energy but with processes happening in the port, which includes logistics operations. And we take into account also elements of uncertainty, because at the moment we hypothesize that with the absence of data we won't be too certain about these key decisions. Now, A lot of the work we're doing, as I said, is trying to illustrate, trying to demonstrate what would happen if we have better coordination around these processes. So this is an illustrative example of things we've done. And we've got different cargo handling equipment, for example, cranes operating. So instead of blindly, if you like, allocating them throughout the mission, throughout the operation of these in times where the energy price might be high or the carbon intensity of the network might be high, we try to allocate them to serve the same mission, the same energy, if you like, but in different times of the day when these would be less carbon intensive and less costly for the port. And by that, we achieve lower emissions and lower operational costs. And another element of the work we've done is that because we do not know or we can't predict with a lot of accuracy how the profiles of these of these assets will be. So, for example, I've shown that the profile of the cargo handling equipment would be the black line, but we don't really know. It could be anything between these limits because we don't have the data, we don't have confidence of the data, and this will lead to more, if you like, conservative decisions, not only around the operation, but also in terms of the planning. So we would be forced to invest more in assets because we don't really know the worst case scenario. Now, we hypothesize that with the presence of a digital platform, something that would allow us to reduce the uncertainty around the operating profiles and a lot of other things, this kind of envelope of uncertainty will be reduced, and that would lead to significant infrastructural decisions or requirements, if you like. So a lot of the work we've done in our modeling had to do with data collection. So we collected data around key energy processes, including ships, logistics operation and crane operation of cargo handling equipment, other parts like, for example, key energy processes like refrigerated storage containers or offices, anything that happens in the port, and included network data. A lot of the burden, if you like, or a lot of the effort went to actually collecting this data, synthesizing it and analyzing it, because as the slide here suggests, we've got all sorts of different types of data around all these operations, and I'm just going to show now about ships, but it's the same across. Like ship data, auxiliary engine data, load factors, hours at berth, and they come from different sources as well. So there's no single source at the moment that does give us all the information we need to accurately model and predict these things. So a lot of the effort, a lot of the trouble we had was to combine these data types and to combine them from different data sources. So you can imagine the problem that an operator or a planner has when they're called to predict this kind of usage, where they have to combine all this data, which also changes from year to year. So we relied on 2019 data, for example, but the picture is different now. It's going to be different in 2 years, it's going to be different in 5 years or in 10 years. So a lot of this happened in consultation, so we even had to use expert judgment or interview people to get the right picture, which, as I said, advocates towards the presence of some sort of uniform platform that would allow us to collect all this. So we've mapped the operation of these assets. As I said, a lot had to physically require a presence in the port to interview people, to get the data, to get the understanding around these operations. Things like average demands, number of use of assets, average demands, operating hours throughout the day when the assets are operating. So this was a very difficult and, if you like, manual process that we did. So we've synthesized these kind of maps where we have the different parts of the network of the port, and we've predicted the operation, well, we mapped the operation of today, but also started predicting how things would be, as I said, in consultation with the rest of the partners, Siemens, the Catapult, creating this joint vision, if you like, of how things might be progressing and producing some scenarios of how we think infrastructure would be. Now, we've modeled this, and although I'm showing here a network model, this isn't limited to the network, but considers cost and carbon intensity of all energy sources that we've considered, like MGO, diesel, and grid electricity. And we've built these scenarios where we calculate diesel fuel consumption, grid electricity, and we try to map, as I said, the operation in terms of carbon intensity and costs around these energy processes. So data that we've used, for example, and this is just an example of things that we're using, is energy price throughout the day or carbon intensity of the grid energy, and alongside profiles like PV generation, for example. And we model the energy consumption and the CO2 emissions, taking into account, as I said, not only electricity, but the operational constraints of assets. For example, when we're time shifting reefers, refrigerating units, we take into account their ambient temperature, their constraints around this kind of operation. And things, just to summarize some of our results, things that we're seeing, for example, for 2030, if we consider a base case where no coordination is happening, where we are now, all these processors run agnostically of their CO2 emissions, and we compare them to a 2030 scenario, for example, when we don't have any optimization, or we're starting to coordinate and dispatch these assets according to CO2 emissions, we are starting to see some marginal benefits, both in terms of CO2 emissions and in terms of energy costs. If we go forward, where we have increased electrification of these assets, we are starting to see more significant reductions in the order of 12% and 16% for carbon emissions and costs, respectively, compared to the 2022 year. And as we go forward, where we have more increased electrification, we are starting to see very significant reductions in terms of costs, for example, and also exporting capabilities. So we're starting to have a surplus because we're able to coordinate and dispatch these assets, store energy when it's cheap, and release it when it's expensive, and therefore make additional benefits, operating, if you like, the port as an energy hub with exporting capabilities and contributing to the wider network. So this is a summary of the different years that we've modeled, and as you can see, the reductions become more and more significant the more we electrify things and the more we add things like wind turbines and PVs, and this is just what we get from just purely the infrastructure deployed in the ports. And this is what we're getting from just the digitalization side of things. So when we're starting to be able to coordinate these assets, we are starting to see significant reductions, as I said, both in terms of costs and CO2 emissions. Now, I've mentioned uncertainty around data, so we've done some modeling and simulations of this to demonstrate the benefits that we can achieve because of the presence of data. So we looked into reducing this envelope of uncertainty, as I said before, with the presence of a digital platform. So we're more confident on how our assets will operate. We're more confident about what the future will yield. So we have calculated, for a case of energy storage, for example, that we can have close to half the investment needed to guarantee us the same probability of having the emissions that we anticipated, which means that we can purchase a storage system that is £3.35 million cheaper by having the platform, because we won't need to take so conservative decisions, if you like, around these, the operation of these assets. So point being, we can have both operational benefits in terms of energy costs and CO2 emissions and low requirements for infrastructural investment. I'm talking storage here, but the same could be done with wind, solar, or whatever. So finally, just to summarize, this table gives us the picture of the simulations we've done. As we electrify the port, we have emission reductions because of infrastructure, but the project, as I said, is about also making the differential, showing the additional benefit that can be achieved when we digitalize, when we collect all this data, and when we analyze it, and we're more confident about it. So significant reductions in terms of CO2 and energy costs, and the same for infrastructure. So point being, we have produced evidence that actually show us what the digital platform would do, both in terms of operation and investment cost reductions. So this was all I wanted to say. There will be time for questions. I would like to also introduce Ian, who is going to be talking to us about the actual platform and its capabilities. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for turning up. Same as everybody else. I'm going to link to a couple of other screens, but I've got a few slides to go through first. So I'll just plug in my computer here. And I'll get the nod from the team to make sure that everything's all right, I think, when it comes up. So this is a platform that we've deployed. I'm Ian Lloyd from Siemens. I represent the smart infrastructure part of the business. We've been developing solutions for a number of years now around about digitalization and being able to further what people can do in different clusters of industry and infrastructure across the UK as a whole. And one of the aspects that we truly, clearly want to be able to focus on is on digitalization and to enable decarbonisation and ultimately cost reduction measures that customers can be able to understand and then to be able to shift forward with. So this is the tool. This is our tool that we use as a distributed energy optimization platform. We've designed it and we've bespoke it particularly for the Port of Tyne, and work very closely in conjunction with the group set of different partners in this consortium. So you've seen this graphic a number of different times today, of course, and ultimately what we start to see is that we've been talking about how this digital platform enables the outputs of the models and how they can be translated into operational designs and mechanics and tools that the port can be able to work with on an ongoing basis. So here is the basis of it. We start to have these different designs for new technology, new assets, start to understand about how they're likely to make an impact within the port environment, and start to understand about how we can connect them. So how can we digitalize some of these assets? Some of them may be new, some of them may be old. The newer they are, generally the more connectable they are. They have different protocols, they have different security assets that have been built into them. But many times, especially in the port environment that has evolved over a period of time, maybe 100 years or more, there's a lot of old assets that sit out on the grid that need to be upgraded, that need to be retrofitted, to have monitoring to add to them, to enable their connection to a digital platform. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that they're replacement. So it's not always a new for old, even though sometimes that may be more beneficial, especially when it comes to operations and operational resilience. What we start to do then within any digital platform and any sort of considerations that we go through is around about how we can gather that information, how we can stream it into a secure location. And security, of course, is really key, especially for a port environment, piece of national infrastructure, where people want to have the security and the peace of mind is that the data, however it's being captured, and then what you can do with it and what you can coordinate and control with it, that is being housed in a secure environment. So there's security, there's a key basis about what actually we do. So this is the dotted line up here is our cloud space, so like entity where we capture information, we stream it to, and we secure it. And this security, of course, gives us this ability then to be able to capture, harness the information from multiple different energy vector sources, oil, gas, heat, electricity, right? All those different views. And as Harris mentioned there, the port of the future is likely to have many different energy vectors. We might have hydrogen, we might have ammonia, we might have different sort of like gaseous sources. We might have small nuclear reactors that are available. So the whole world is really a possibility. And this entity, this graphic here at the bottom, is that representation around about how we can sort of connect to different assets, regardless of what they are, where they are, and we can start to be able to create this digital environment around about what the port is, and then what we can do in terms of the data and how we can use it to be able to process it and create different algorithms in terms of the optimized scheduling, like Harris explained in greater detail. And of course, the benefits of this, some of them are soft and some of them are hard, of course, in terms of where this positions us as a strategy. So the strategic sort of like value of what we've achieved as a small group of consortium and the Clean Maritime Demonstrator Fund as a whole, right, enables these differences, these different elements about sort of like thought leadership, you know, in creating a lighthouse, creating the blueprint about being able to sort of like take the outputs of this port and being able to translate them to other ports elsewhere, and finding the most cost-effective and the secure way of being able to do that. So agility, flexibility, replication, and transferability are all some of those key elements. And these topics on the far side of the graphic there, some of those ones are exactly what Tom has explained, what Ian will refer to in terms of his summary, and how Harris has been through in greater detail around about how we can use the information that enables the consideration for the port to be able to identify what they choose to do today and what they choose to want to do tomorrow in terms of their infrastructure investment planning. So the digital platform that we've created has this basis. So this is a graphic, this is an image of the port, of course, that sits on the back side. And there's the DOP view that sits in the middle there. And I'll come to actually showing you the live platform very shortly. But ultimately, there's a whole range of assets that are connected across the port. And these are the connected assets that we've actually streamed into the platform. So some of them are future and some of them are now. Okay, but the reality is that there are a number of different sources that are being captured through existing metering or manual meter recording methods that need to be accessed by the port operations team on an ongoing basis. Now, some of those things they might have to log into once a day, once a week, once a month, maybe once a year. Right? And then there's different methods that they would have to go through to be able to download that information, to be able to structure it in some sort of Excel table, to be able to analyze it, to try to assess, so like where there's some key aspects about so like what is happening on a day-to-day basis, and then what you can choose to do. Well, lo and behold, we've been able to connect a number of different assets. We've only been on this project, of course, for a short number of months, but we've been able to connect over 200 metering sources from different energy vectors into this platform in a relatively short space of time, so we can start to be able to understand how energy is being used and what we can do in terms of implementing different types of online assessments and analysis to be able to assess about how these assets can all be coordinated better in the future to align to delivering what the model outputs that we've achieved with the rest of the consortium team. And this is that futuristic sense. And ultimately, where we are today, we've been heavily focusing on the electrical power and on the transport transition that sits in the bottom end there, where we're considering the shorter ship power. And the reason for being able to do that in this initial modelling scenario is a case for us being able to understand about how energy is currently being used in the port environment, especially in the electrical area, and how the electrification of the existing port assets that are very heavily dominated by marine oil and diesel oil consumption, and how that is likely to change the port's outlook in terms of its carbon output and its operational cost. And the transport transition there, in terms of the shorter ship power, as Harris explained in great detail, there's an awful lot of carbon output from the port itself, just in carbon, but also in different other pollutants, in gases and particulates that are available, that will also be overcome by the use of shorter ship power. So this is ships that are, when they come onto the port side, they are connected to electrical power, and it avoids them burning diesel through their auxiliary engines, right, just to be able to live and breathe while they're on the port side. In the futuristic sense up here, there's opportunity, maybe on this port, maybe on other ports, where there's a larger amount of built environment and different types of mobility areas that can be intensified. And all these things can be linked together with this sector coupling tool that sits somewhat in the middle. Okay, and then ultimately at the top end is what we do is that we pull information in from carbon intensity, from weather forecasting, from air quality and different types of the cost and energy markets that are available to be able to come up with the variable aspects that are driven into our algorithms to enable the most optimal scheduling of loads within the port environment. So these key aspects in here, these are the trends that allow us to be able to consider what variables allow us to be able to shift forward. And now I think we can just switch over screens, please, onto the digital platform. Hopefully it hasn't gone to sleep on me. So ultimately, this is a view of the digital platform itself, if none of you considered what one looks like. And what we've tried to do, we've tried to consider, so like, what is the story in here within the port environment? So we want to be able to try to tell the story about how the port is operating today, how the port is likely to operate in the medium term, and how the port is likely to operate in the future. Okay, and the benefits of this then, it gives us an ability just to be able to take the information as it is current, as it is live, to be able to work with that, with the models that we have, to be able to synthesize that and to be able to simulate it, either through the university or through some very powerful software tools, to be able to assess what is the cost of change, what is the impact of change, and what is the ongoing cost of maintenance and operation of each and every one of those assets. So the full techno-economic output analysis of some of these tools, based on the data that's being captured and the way that it is transposed into algorithms in terms of how we schedule and optimize some of these assets, is critically important. And this view here, I know it's difficult to see, especially at the back, but I've shrunk it down so I can get the entire screen all on one view because I don't want to be able to scroll up and down. So we have these different views that are on here, and then we have like live views about so like the amount of energy that's being consumed across the port as an entirety. And on the bottom side here, you see this graphic here in terms of exactly what Harris was explaining beforehand, is that you have this transition. And this transitionary step takes us from where we are today in red into the medium-term future where we have a moderate amount of electrification of port cargo handling and shorter ship power, and then into the future where we have a full electrified assets across the port subbase. And ultimately, we get these different types of views then that you can start to be able to understand, and this is where I rely on the internet connection to tell me whether it's fast or slow. So we get these different views that are available that comes up, and this is the port instance that's being streamed. So this is live data that's being captured from the port over the last few weeks and months. This is live streams around about so like the amount of energy that's being consumed within different areas on the port side, right, and different graphics in terms of a representation of the amount of assets that are currently being monitored and what that asset list is likely to change like in the future. Okay, so just to make the screen a little bit larger for you, we have this wrong button. We have a 2040 view here, as the screen loads. And this 2040 view determines how the port is likely to change somewhat. And how Harris explained in his presentation beforehand, there's a variety of different electrical assets that are avoiding the use of marine oil within the port side in a relatively short space of time. And just to make the system even simpler, we start to be able to consider what the electrification of those assets are likely to be, and then we start to consider around about what the consumption is likely to be on the port and what the generation is likely to be on the port. So you start to be able to have this very clear offset in terms of the amount of carbon that's being exported by the port and what that is likely to change. As I jump into 2050 view, very similar, but you start to see a larger amount of assets that are connected across the port environment that sits there. Now, interestingly, there's a number of different views that sits underneath this platform, of course, and I'll try and jump to another one. just to give you some sort of detail of the structure that's there, that sits behind it. And as the port loads, we start to see different views within the port environment of how the port naturally exists. Oops, scroll in, scroll out. So there's a number of different ways here. So one element about the digitalisation of this platform is that we've been able to consider 3 key elements within the port environment and how it physically exists. So this is the infrastructure of the port itself. We've based it in terms of the network connection points, or the points of common coupling, right, to the existing electrical networks and how they're likely to change in the future. There's 3 different zones that sit in here, 2 on the south side of the river, 1 on the north side. This is Slake Terrace, Tyne Coal and International Passenger Terminal. These are the largest areas of electrical load currently, and in our models they're set to become extremely much larger in terms of electrical load. So in terms of change, if I clicked on here on the, if I click on here, I'm getting a bit mouse happy because it's not responding as quickly as what it normally does. So we get this view here in terms of what the International Passenger Terminal currently looks like, where are the energy off-takers that sits within that platform, where are we capturing data from, and how we can be able to harness that in the future. Now, the futuristic views of that will be solar canopies that cover these car parks, short-to-ship charging devices that sit on the back end of the port side to be able to substantiate the amount of power that is normally being consumed through diesel oil or marine oil on these vessels. So you have the ferries and the large cruise ships that turn up. And some of them may be there for a number of different days, weeks, or even months. So there's different varieties of aspects that sit on this. And the information structure that sits in here is a hierarchical measure of all these different electrical assets, fuel oil assets, gas assets, that all combine to be able to give us a very clear view about total energy consumption across the port environment. So this is an aggregation platform. It's where we start to be able to capture energy information as a whole. Now, there's a number of different things that we can start to address, of course, within this port environment. But if I just load a saved report in here, and this gives this operational view in terms of how we can support the port in terms of being able to avoid them, to be able to look at and log into maybe multiple different platforms and allow them to be able to understand what is likely. So if I look at the full port environment, if I click on a month here, this is going to pull down live data. So this is live data consumed within the port environment. There's a little bit of a gap in there on the bottom end, but this is a demonstrator platform. But ultimately, this shows a month of activity about data capture from multiple different energy vectors within the port environment. And you can start to run these different types of reports, export them, do further analysis on them, share them with education and academic partners, share them with you can start to be able to select in the different areas up here and about, so like this may be one crane, it may be another crane. You start maybe being able to consider about, so like why is one more efficient than the other one? So you start to drive some operational dynamics. You can start to so like indicate whether there's any key performance indicators that you want to be able to address with the contracts that you have in place with some of those operators. So this data is key for operational delivery, and it's also key to be able to simulate what we're likely to do in the future. Now, one of the last things I just want to be able to show you is just, this isn't just a data capture tool, of course. The ability here as well is just to be able to stream some information. So once you have connected assets, you start to be able to understand whether they're performing in their correct manner. It may advise you that there's maybe some sort of maintenance regime that you'd like to do. It may advise you that there's some alarm or some event that you need to acknowledge or you need to address immediately with your workforce. So this tool, because of this digitalization, this connectivity around about all the assets that sit across the port side, gives you this ability just to be able to look at different assets, to be able to understand whether they've got alarms or events, but also interestingly, through analysis of the platform and through the automation of algorithms, is that we can identify anomalies. And anomalies in data is one of those important aspects, is where I mentioned beforehand, where our colleagues at the port have advised us that they need to pull down information. It may be streams of it, maybe weeks, months, or even years, and they have to manually trawl through this information to be able to understand whether something is good, bad, indifferent, getting worse, getting better, if it's performing differently under different weather characteristics, all these different types of things. So all these different algorithms can be brought to bear to be able to drive operational optimization and performance within a tool like this. And the anomaly detection is one of those elements, is where we can start to be able to address about how a port, or any industry, of course, can start to align this data to their operational processes and start to advise them about whether they can improve some measures through different types of maintenance or operational regime changes. Ultimately, this is a digital platform. It's the first revision on a UK port. It's transferable and it's replicable, and so it is the blueprint of a digital platform for ports of the future. And that's it for me. And I'm going to hand over to Ian Blake now, our port representative, and I'll go back to the main screen. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Ian Blake, I'm Head of Innovation and Technology at the Port of Tyne. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the Port of Tyne today and to our Innovation Hub. I will let you all into a secret for those of you that don't know me. Public speaking is not my forte, I'm not a big fan of being on stage. So the fact that these guys have got me to do a video, be on stage and a panel session is absolute testament to how much I rate this project and how thrilled I am to be involved. Thank you. With regard to the video, I was told that all members of the panel and the team would be involved in that. So the fact that I'm the only one that made the final cut, I'm not saying I'm the best looking out of the team, but I'll let you come to your own conclusions. So before we talk about the Clean Maritime Demonstrator, I just want to go through a brief history of how we got to where we are as a port and as an innovation hub. So back in January 2019, remember those days? We could go on holiday, no face masks, much happier times. So the UK government launched Maritime 2050 in January of that year. Maritime 2050 is the UK government's 30-year strategy to modernise the UK port sector. I'm not telling tales out of school when I admit that the maritime sector is slightly behind the curve when it comes to technology implementation. Maritime 2050 looks to redress that balance and bring technology and new ideas into the sector. One part of Maritime 2050 said it would look at the establishment of a cross-sector innovation hub in a UK port by 2030. So that was 11 years. 6 months later, in July 2019, the Port of Tyne opened our innovation hub here at Tyne Dock. This is the first and only maritime innovation hub of its kind in the UK and fully aligned with Maritime 2050. Although the hub is based here at the Port of Tyne, it is a partnership. We're partnering with Connected Places Catapult, Nissan, Ubisoft, Essentia, Royal Haskoning, Drax, the Offshore Renewable Catapult, and the Department of Transport. Shortly after we launched the hub, the Port of Tyne also launched Tyne 2050, which is our own ambitious 30-year plan to modernise our own services. Again, fully aligned with Maritime 2050, reviewed annually and available on our website. If you're interested in knowing more, it's also on a loop on the video in reception. So just talking a bit more about Tyne 2050, it covers 8 strategic themes covering 28 discrete projects. The themes are environment, financial sustainability, health and safety, innovation and technology, our communities, our customers, our people, security and resilience. 28 projects all led by members of the workforce. This is being delivered by managers, supervisors and volunteers from all areas of the company. Our people are really helping to transform our business. I just want to take a deep dive into 3 of the most relevant areas of Tyne 2050. So with innovation and technology, we're looking to devise a data strategy. We're looking to realise the value of the data that we generate at the Port of Tyne. Some of that will feed into Ian's platform that he mentioned earlier. And we're also looking at our smart port strategy. This is to look at new technology, new processes and new ways to change the port industry, to improve efficiencies and to optimise what we do. From the environment theme, we're looking at an all-electric port. We've committed to be fully electric by 2040. And we're also looking to develop a clean energy testbed. So we want to welcome new ideas, new startups, new processes into the port and help collaborate to build new ideas for sustainable energy. And from our people, our Fit for the Future programme is helping to provide a digital upskilling programme for our staff to help with the implementation of new technology and also to make the port sector more attractive for school leavers and university leavers to come into the sector. As part of our green agenda, as I mentioned, we're looking at a clean energy testbed. So we want to be a centre for clean energy and innovation here at the Tyne. We've started the electrification of our quayside equipment, including cranes and hoppers, and also that includes the purchase of 2 new hybrid cranes. We're currently looking to replace our diesel van fleet with electric vehicles and currently looking at how we can alter our infrastructure to accommodate those vehicles. We're looking at the adoption of sustainable fuels, and we will be starting an HVO trial in a few weeks' time, which will mean an 80% reduction on emissions in our HDV fleet. We're looking to add solar panels to the warehouse roofs to provide sustainable energy for our warehouse operations. And we're exploring the opportunities around small and large-scale wind turbines. We've completed the installation of our LED smart lighting, and we've installed smart meters across the business for electricity, gas and water. And all of these will feed into our roadmap for renewable energy generation for the port. So back on topic, why the Clean Maritime Demonstrator? Well, briefly put, it aligns perfectly with our Tyne 2050 vision. We want to be net zero by 2030 and all electric by 2040. The digital platform allows us to identify our current needs and our future needs. It helps to build our clean energy testbed so we can bring in new technology, feed the information into the system and see where the benefits lie. To develop the system further, we can look at our automated environmental impact, so we can look at our emissions and we can look at other environmental issues around the system. We're looking to utilise smart technology and smart processes to help fit with the smart port process that we're looking to integrate into the business. And hopefully, once our 5G private network comes online, we'll be able to live feed from IoT sensors spread around the port so we can look at optimising vehicle cycle times and other aspects of energy usage. And most of all, we've got to collaborate with a fantastic bunch of companies from academia and industry. It really has been eye-opening to work with the consortium. They've been fantastic. So what are the benefits for the port? After Ian's demonstration, I don't think we need to talk about the benefits because it sells itself. But the process does provide a blueprint for the port's transition to net zero. We know where we are now and we know where we want to be. And this system helps us map the stages to get from as is to be. The scenario planning and feasibility study aspect helps determine the future power needs of the port. So as I mentioned earlier, we're looking to electrify our quayside equipment. We're looking to bring in new hybrid technology and new electric vehicles. This system helps us determine if we've got enough power in the grid, capacity in the grid to help power those. If not, where are the shortfalls? If we bring online some new sustainable energy, if we put in a wind turbine or solar powers, what does that give us? What can we bring back from the grid? We can understand the port's current and forecast power usage, which will help determine our future planning going forward. The digital twin allows us to visualize and analyze the energy consumption. So we can do this in real time now. So previously, as Ian mentioned, gathering the power data for month-end reporting was an extremely manual and laborious task. We had paper-based systems and data from various systems that we had to collate manually. This took days of time. We can now see it in real time, so we can start to make data-led decisions. If we've got trucks idling when they're not working, we can turn them off. If we're lighting areas that aren't in use, we can dim the lights or turn them off. We can make decisions in real time. And of course, the business case planning to aid prioritisation of energy projects to ensure return on investment and environmental benefits to the business. So there are a myriad of smart green energy options out there. We need to be able to decide which ones will deliver the greater benefit. So we need to prioritise them To do that, this system provides the data that we can use to build the business cases for the more relevant pieces. So what next? We're already speaking to Siemens about continuing to develop the system to add new data streams. As I mentioned previously, we're looking to bring our 5G private network online soon, and we'll be installing IoT sensors to gather more data in real time. We want to expand the system, include additional metrics. We're looking to include waste, emissions, environmental issues around dust monitoring and noise. And we want to enhance the automation and data gathering by including IoT sensors and other new processes. And lastly, we want to shout about our success. We are really proud of what we've achieved here. We're not a port to circle the wagons and keep this technology to ourselves. We want to share it with the world. We want to build this as a blueprint at every port in the UK and every sector in the UK. As said earlier, where the Port of Tyne leads, others must follow. Thank you very much. I'll pass over to Howie.
Last presentation of the day. Good morning, everyone. My name is Howie Chan. I'm a Senior Systems Engineer at the Connected Places Catapult. And today I'll be sharing one of our Clean Tyne's work that supports Clean Tyne's digitalization and decarbonisation transition. So I want to start by revisiting what my colleagues covered earlier, particularly around the importance of ports having a role to play in net zero innovation hubs. Their efforts can take in many different forms, including increasing operational efficiencies, generating and using clean energy, as well as providing the access to green shore power. Clean Tyne is one of the collaborative demonstration projects that represents the huge opportunity for the UK to build on its strength in maritime sector and become a centre of excellence for clean shipping. And to look at the UK context, we're an island nation where ports are critical parts of the national logistics networks. Ports act as a multimodal transport hubs to support the effectiveness and resilience of our supply chains. And to help UK to remain competitive in the global trade, this will require a whole holistic and end-to-end approach, as well as learning from other transportation sectors, including road, rail, and aviation, that are also facing similar decarbonisation challenges. And at CPC, we are doing just this and have led complementary programs for the Department for Transport, such as trialling hydrogen-powered heavy goods vehicles and developing a blueprint for airports to reach net zero emission flights. As part of Clean Tyne Project, CPC has been leading on the Green Port Blueprint, business case and proposal. So, creating a Green Port Blueprint is not a task to be done by a single organisation. There is still a lack of clarity on what the port of future should look like for the UK, as Tom mentioned earlier. And to put this into context, the Maritime 2050 strategy addresses smart ports specifically, with a vision of ports being digitalised and integrated across the wider supply chain and logistics systems. However, it is not very clear what makes a port smart and where the opportunity truly exists for the UK, particularly around the impactful opportunities in digitalisations and decarbonisation exist, which slows investment. In the Clean Tyne business case deliverable, we've identified digital applications. Digital applications are one of the core enablers for the use cases as shown on the screen here. The parallel digitalisation of port operations will see radically new ways of working and allow operators to benefit from new business models. For example, the availability of data increases as the data increases the confidence in decision making and the coordinated assets through transparency, accuracy, and efficiency. Other energy performances benefits include scenario planning and energy management and resiliencies, as some of my colleagues mentioned earlier. This added flexibility of data platform provides will be crucial to the wider industry and ecosystems context, where the forecasted levels of cargo traffic are expected to increase by a healthy 1% per year for the foreseeable future. And as demonstrated here at the Port of Tyne a few months ago, the first ever container shipment of goods coming directly from China into the UK had docked and been efficiently unloaded in the South Shields. It represents a turning point for the Port of Tyne as a potential destination for the logistics Hub, which for others to seek an alternative to congested southern ports. The flexibility of port could play a key role to ease the strains created by the simultaneous increased consumer demands and global supply challenges to ensure timely delivery of goods across the UK. So where are we heading, and how do we get there if we don't know what if we're not clear on what a smart port is? So we've heard from Newcastle University about scenario modelling. We've heard from Siemens about the energy infrastructure and digital platform. We've heard from Port of Tyne about providing the collaborative testbed. What I will be covering now is the digitalized transition required. So from our literature review work, the current published material is largely technology-led, and there is no clear transition plan for the stakeholders in these sectors to leverage individual efforts across the UK. In this project, we've attempted to define the port digitalisation transition on 3 different levels, with the use of the port's environment diagram on the left and the high-level digital architecture on the right. So in the first level, where the digitalisation is low, we see the emergence of moving away from previously constrained analog energy processes to digital processes. These are pockets of change with increasing levels of monitoring and data access that are not linked intelligently with one another. An example of this, as mentioned earlier, is the introduction of electrification of cargo handling equipment and smart metering from previously paper-based and ad hoc refill process. So in the interim stage, before the port becomes fully smart, we would expect ports' chaotic digital processes to become interconnected to allow information to flow seamlessly within sub-processes. This is enabled by linking up multiple assets, data sources, and external stakeholders that are part of what we define as closed operation. An example of this would be optimizing performance of cargo handling process whilst reducing cost. And in the final high digitalization stage, synergies are reached between the closed operations enabled by the implementation of workflow engines on the digital platform. This allows standardizations and automations of processes where the port becomes capable of planning and managing its own operations across multiple areas and functions. Specifically, the ports can make real-time holistic analysis with increased interactions between vessels and cities, as well as the additional levels of complexity that comes with new energy vectors, demands, and supply. So I've talked quite a bit about the different levels of digitalizations levels. So with each increasing level of digitalizations in mind, the project partners have identified several activities for decarbonizations. And we've put these activities together in an interactive transition roadmap I've got on the screen now. This will help to support Port of Tyne in these transitions and achieve net zero by 2050. But we also envisage this blueprint being beneficial to port authorities across the UK. And the aim of this is to help to define the process ports and authorities should consider in the short, medium, and long term to enable cleaner, sustainable, and more effective operations, as well as inspiring a change of mindset and processes in the maritime industry. So we've grouped these practical actions into 4 key intervention streams, and these are, number 1, understanding the business model. These are activities that relate to engagement with key partners and customers to support the planning and co-creations of opportunities that drive revenue growth and novel business services that are enabled by the digital platform. Number 2, the energy generation progress. This is the port's progress on electrification of assets and rollout of renewable energy generation and storage on site to lower with efforts to lower carbon intensities and reduce reliance on the grid electricity. Number 3, digital platform development. This is the progress against the digital services that will control the key energy processes, considering both emissions and energy costs that Harris mentioned earlier. This includes integration of data sources and deployment of algorithms for scheduling, coordinations, and optimization of cargo handling operations. And finally, number 4, infrastructure development. These are the energy infrastructure interventions that are aligned with the business needs and the port's progressions to digitalize and decarbonize operations. This includes engagement with power networks operators and gaining an understanding of detailed power and data network upstream investment required, as well as creating a clear plan for the new energy vectors and ongoing expansions of network infrastructure portfolios. So whilst this roadmap sets out a possible timeline for implementing change to satisfy the 2050 goal, we recognise this also requires port authorities taking a proactive stance through improving circular economy synergies, investing in new infrastructure such as offshore energy, and redeveloping existing port areas to support new services. So the key takeaway I want everyone to have from our roadmap is that if net zero 2050 is to be achieved, these 4 interventions must be delivered together. This includes informing and interacting with each other as port operations develop. We're hoping to have this roadmap up on the screen where we can get more feedback from the audience today, and your input will be very valuable for us to refine this blueprint before we disseminate it wider across the sector. So thank you for everyone's time, and I'll hand over to David from North East LEP.
Okay, thanks, Howie. Okay, great presentations, everybody. Thank you very much. So I'm David Lynch. I'm Energy Innovation Partnership Manager at North East LEP, and I'm going to be chairing a panel session. So I just want to ask the gents to rejoin us on stage and grab a chair as you come up. And as they're settling themselves, if I could just give you a reminder to visit slido.com and submit your questions using the hashtag Clean Tyne to submit your questions. You can also vote for each other's questions, and I can see them as they pop up here on the prompt screen. We do have some pre-prepared questions which I'll start with. I'll just let the gents get settled. Musical chairs, as you can see. It's actually very warm up here as well with the screen. We won't keep you too long. So we've got about 20 minutes for questions. We've got just a few questions. Clearly, it's been a really fascinating project to be part of as well. And thank you all for your presentations again this morning. I'll start with you, Ian, from Siemens, Ian Lloyd. Thank you for the demonstration of the portal earlier. It's clearly an energy master planning tool that could be applied to other sites like other ports, airports, shopping centres, universities. In terms of deploying it here at the Port of Newcastle, Port of Tyne, sorry, Freudian slip, Port of Tyne, what have been the key development and deployment challenges here at the Port of Tyne?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. There's been numerous, hasn't there? Actually, as we've gone through, the first off is actually the bringing together of a consortium. That's a big piece of the work. There was some understanding about what we were trying to achieve, what it would physically look like, what it was going to be. So ultimately, defining that vision was a really critically important part, I think, for us all to align very early on. And then some of the challenges, of course, were around about advising around where we could gather information from, where we can gather data. And really, it wasn't difficult, but what made it more difficult is that this is probably a 2 or a 3 year project that's been condensed into 6 months, right? And that's the reality, is that there's been an awful lot of effort that's been done through all the different consortium partners that have been all brought together. And Tom explained earlier, I'm sure this is the same for all the other different projects that's out there. There's been supply issues. We've dealt with the COVID pandemic. There's been accessibility to site and all these different things. So I think some of those are the key challenges. But the second element was the benefits, wasn't it? I think,
and lessons learned as
well.
well.
Yeah, and so I think some of the key lessons learned is that we can do it. It has been done. It has been accelerated and expedited into a delivery that both is a roadmap, as Howie just explained, which is very clear, right, and very articulate in terms of the information that's on there to be able to advise other ports about being able to go through. Also, we've got a digital platform that can be replicated elsewhere. But I think some of the key benefits are, and sorry to hog the floor, is that under the advice that we've got and all the different modelling that we've got, is that we can achieve a net zero port by 2050.
Yeah.
We will nearly get there by 2040. And the whole evidence is suggesting that with the use of a platform and following the roadmap, is that the Port of Tyne, following today's baseline, should have an operational cost point around about 50% cheaper than what it is today by going about its normal day-to-day business after the electrification of all assets and the costs that come in. But
thank you. It's really good. Thank you. So I'll come to you next, Ian, from the Port of Tyne's perspective. You were the first to create the Maritime Hub here, the Innovation Hub, which Grant is very pleased about. We could see from the video this morning. What have been the key takeaways from the project, from the Innovation Hub, and impact and outcomes for wider port operations and plans to decarbonise?
For me, I think it's the ability to realise the value of the data that we've got. A port as an industry creates a myriad of different data streams. A lot of it isn't used, or it's in unstructured format. So this platform creates calm from the chaos that is our data. It helps us bring all of those data collection areas around the port, around energy, gas, fuel usage, into one centralised platform. Yeah. As I mentioned previously, we can spend days, weeks gathering this information into a platform where we can share with the management team so they can see our data. And by the time that's done, the opportunity to make savings has been lost, because we're always looking at it in retrospect. To be able to deliver this information in real time means we can make genuine data-led decisions about our data usage. That also helps us to plan for the future, so we can make sure that we choose the right projects for us. It helps us to plan out what savings we can make, what benefits we can make from a fuel cost and an emissions perspective. So to be able to do that is light years from where we were 6 months ago. And as Ian said, what we've achieved in 6 months is nothing short of remarkable.
Yeah, I'd echo that. Brilliant stuff. And I'll come to you now, Howie, from Connected Places Catapult. You obviously presented the Clean Tyne's transition roadmap. Firstly, what do you feel are the main roadblocks to Port of Tyne realising that roadmap? And what resources required, do you think, to overcome such challenges?
Yeah, still working, yeah. Okay. I mentioned in the presentations, it requires the 4 key intervention streams to be done in parallel, but also highlighted in our business case report, there are 4 key barriers. Number 1 is the initial high capital costs that may be associated with implementing infrastructure that are not compatible with the digital platform to collect that data. Number 2 is the complexity of getting the organisational structure in place, because this involves many stakeholders if we're going to have a single digital platform. So there's going to be contractual agreements to be set in place as well as the data. From a data perspective, I saw a question came in about privacy. So regulations, policies around data handling, what data is being captured and how it's being handled. And then finally around operational challenges such as skills workforce, not just at present, but also in the future. So skilled experienced engineers that are required to help support the understanding of the algorithms to be implemented, how it will benefit the functions provided at the port.
Thank you, Howie. And if I come to you now, Harris, from a data perspective, clearly the project carried a lot of challenges for you, and you've done a lot of hard work across the Newcastle team there. Given the broad nature and scale of the Port of Tyne's operations, can you provide us with a little bit of insight into the key data challenges that presented for you and the lessons learned there, please?
Yeah, well, okay, I'd say, I kind of hinted that on the slide about the data. We had difficulty actually putting it all together, because it came from different sources, and we've got different types of data. I think one of the lessons learned, and we kind of hypothesized it, but but I think it has been proven beyond any reasonable doubt that we need to take a interdisciplinary approach, because I can't understand all that data myself. Something that I didn't mention, but it wasn't the slide, is that this was a collaborative effort. First of all, well, as far as the university is concerned, between energy, power systems, and marine. So I've had excellent colleagues from the marine side. Alan Murphy is here, for example. We've got Kevin Pazuki and John Mangan. And most of our researchers, mentioned Annabel Bauker, Elias Sarantakos, Adibalaham Enrong, and Juan Land, have worked across these two areas. So I think we can't work in isolation when we go to this kind of scale of things. We need to understand aspects and different disciplines and combine them. So I would say our models are good, but still they're limited. So there is a lot of hypotheses we made, a lot of things we can be adding and expanding if we are to put things together. So getting the data, understanding it, and feeding it into something that models the operation needs to be cognizant of different areas. We also, as I said, spoke with Siemens along the way, and the catapult. We need to be understanding what network operators are saying. So a lot of the data sources requires us to talk with industry, but also a lot of the assumptions we make have to do with policy. So what would be the costs of a ship missing a schedule, for example, and should that be accounted for? So all these things we need us to work outside of our silos, not in just the disciplinary sense, but the, if you like, the academic, talking with industry and policy making. And I think the other thing is that the data was not meant for purpose. When we try to model this, we see that the data collected has been collected for different purposes. It doesn't have the granularity we need. It doesn't have the certainty we need. We need to use proxies to synthesize operating profiles, which advocates towards having a platform that you can actually harvest all that in one single point for multiple purposes. I think these are two important lessons learned from my side.
Thank you, Harris. I think
there are others.
No doubt. I think it does highlight the importance of that multidisciplinary approach, which also reflects the kind of nature of our project team.
Yeah. As I said, I needed to understand things about logistics. I needed to explain to Alan and the guys what I'm trying to get to with the operational profiles. I needed to speak with Siemens to see if they share the same view about investment. And with the catapult, when they're talking about the business cases and the impact logic models, things that I've learned throughout the project, and I think we all enjoyed. I mean, one of the strange things is that we came unbruised, if you like, from such a short project. I think a lot of it had to do that we were all kind of keen to learn from each other. So one thing perhaps we didn't put there is that we learned from this project, and I think that's quite important.
Thank you. Unbruised. Well done. Thanks for Harris. So, Tom, in your presentation, you stated that the Clean Tyne programme has provided a future blueprint for sustainable smart ports. And I think there's a real potential here to regenerate communities, develop new renewable microgrids, and clean maritime fuels as well. But all of that requires significant investment. Where do we go from here in terms of attracting that investment?
Well, I think there's a few different perspectives to look at that from, and starting with the port. So, in the maritime sector, we've got this challenge that the assets that we buy, we have to live with for a long time. So we need a very high degree of confidence that what we're buying is going to be useful to us in 10, 20, 30 years from now. And I think because there are so many different technology options, because some of the technologies are still developing, it really shows the power of demonstrator projects and things like the Clean Maritime Demonstrator competition to help build that confidence in not only how the sort of asset or the product works from a technical perspective, but also what that means as a business in terms of the business case and the return on investment we can have. And particularly when we're talking about solutions that utilise data, I think a big blocker to that in the past, and Ian mentioned the word, the value of the data, and this has been a challenge previously is that we know we have data around us. We know it's out there. Sometimes it's accessible, sometimes it's not. But in terms of how we build on that data and invest in solutions that can utilize it, if we haven't done it before, it's difficult to put a pound sign on the value of that data and understand your return on investment by investing in potential solutions. So with all these solutions, as ports adopt them more, there's obviously all the supporting business ecosystems that set up around that, whether that's in maintenance or the sort of skills we develop and retain in the region and how that opens up other opportunities. But I think as well from an investment perspective, I think one of the things we have to recognise as the maritime sector is that there's a bit of a disconnect between innovators in the sector and potential investors, whether we're talking about institutional investors, venture capital firms, things like that. So we've seen the number of venture capital firms specifically devoted to maritime and logistics increase by something like 60% over the last couple of years, but the investment hasn't always tracked that. So I think there's a lot we have to do to try and connect that space together better, to get more solutions through into the market. Yeah, I think certainly it's definitely really positive to hear the multi-year extension and a much improved budget in the form of Clean Maritime 2 to come later in this year. And if this is what we can achieve in 6 months, give us 2 years and see what we can do then. So that's something I'd be really looking forward to.
Thank you, Tom. Brilliant. And just another question for you, to keep you on the spot. Do you think the platform de-risks that the investors, you know, in their mindset? Do you think, how do we utilise that, you know?
So I think fundamentally what we're trying to do is we're trying to be able to understand more about the port and how it operates. It's trying to bring clarity to where there is previously ambiguity. And it's very difficult to invest in new assets or new solutions where you don't actually have the data to back it up and say, this is how it is today. We can achieve X% efficiency improvement, which will have X pounds impact on the balance book in so many years. And if you don't have the data to prove that, then that's a very difficult argument to make. So I think, you know, through all the presentations today, we were talking about decision making and how we use insight around us to be able to make better decisions, but also, you know, to make those decisions actually happen because we've got the evidence to make them.
Yeah, thank you. Brilliant. Okay, thank you, chaps. We'll now go to the questions via our Slido, and I can see some really good questions popping up. I'll come back to Yui and Lloyd. There's a really good question around what are the potential cybersecurity risks of connecting various assets to a digital platform, and what concerns should there be, and how can these be managed? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. This digitalised state of new networks, of new technologies, new control solutions, needs to have cybersecurity at its very heart. So ensuring that assets are configured correctly, that they have the right security gateways and encryption that allows them to be able to access the platform, to be able to upload information to it, and to be able to draw information from it is of real critical importance. So that security of the platform around about so like data ingress and output is really of critical importance. And at Siemens, of course, we've been involved in national infrastructure projects for many, many years, especially around electricity distribution and transmission. And cybersecurity, now the connected nature of those assets is really driving instances of being able to identify cybersecurity risks and deal with activities that we put in place to be able to either identify vulnerabilities or, at worst case, identify threats and penetrations as they actually naturally occur, and then what you need to do to be able to put a system into a safe state while those networks are being assessed and then being adapted to. So ultimately, it's around about having that futuristic thought about security and cybersecurity in mind at the build stage and at the design stage is of critical importance.
Brilliant, thank you. A question from Tom Nightingale, and I'll point this towards Tom, actually, I think, for this one. Will ships be enforced to power from shore, and will upgrades be required to many vessels?
Well,
Sorry.
I don't know, if I bounce it to the port, are there any plans from the port to enforce that?
Again, slope and shoulders on that one. I think that will be enforced by the UK government rather than by the ports themselves. Ourselves, Royal Haskonian and Connected Places Catapult undertook a shore power feasibility study in 2021, and that pointed to the lack of standardisation amongst vessels. There's a lot of, each vessel built in a different country has different power needs, different power requirements, different power connections. Until the standardisation, it's very difficult as a port to be able to supply power to those vessels. Again, we need government guidance and direction towards the ship owners. At the minute, there's no incentive for those ship owners to convert their vessels to electricity or shore power. We're still building diesel-powered vessels today. Until that changes, then the ports are always going to be on the back foot when it comes to providing shore power. We are looking at several test beds, and there's a new UK shore initiative that's just been announced by the UK government with £200 million worth of investment to explore the opportunities around shore power. So ultimately, long story short, at the minute, no, vessels are not being enforced to do shore power. I think that's where we'll get to. But it will take time and government backing to 10 years down the line.
Thanks, Ian. Harris,
Just to add, I'm not an expert, I'm not a marine expert, but my colleagues here can keep me at bay. I think it's not enforced to connect to shore. It's just reducing their emissions to zero when they're in port areas. So I guess if ships have an alternative way of, turning off their engines, then they would be able to do it. But as Ian said, we do see this kind of lack of standardization, so we don't know what the prevailing solutions would be, but we feel strongly that connection to a net zero grid would be an attractive option when this thing comes into play, that rather than, other solutions.
Well, thank you both. Another good question here around what is the latency of the analysis to teams actually taking action? And I'll point that towards Ian Blake, I think.
Obviously, we're still at the initial stages of the process. We're just taking the first baby steps into understanding what the data can provide. We do have a very ambitious plan. Obviously, the government's steps towards net zero is by 2050. Ours is by 2030. So we want to accelerate the government's initiative by 20 years. We've just brought on Eleni, who's sitting in the front row there, who is our new innovation manager for energy and sustainability. And she will be available in the room for questions later. And she's going to be leading on the clean energy test bed to bring in new technology and new initiatives. So we're certainly not hanging around.
Brilliant.
There's a lot of exciting new startups in the region and globally who are looking at net zero and decarbonisation opportunities, and we want to be at the forefront of that, which is where the test bed will come into it.
Brilliant.
I'm not sure if that answered the question.
You have? No, it's fine. I think we've actually got some solution providers I know in the room as well today, so I'd imagine, Eleni, you'll be very popular during the break, as well as you, Ian, as well, so we'll look forward to that networking later.
Could add something to this,
yes,
David.
Go ahead.
We've found a lot of data, there was a lot of repository of knowledge in the port, so the port has been taking a lot of action. So our modelling, our analysis leaned a lot on previous existing reports that either the port had subcontracted or they've done themselves. And all the teams have been really forthcoming. We've visited the port a few times, spoken with operational managers, with environmental managers. We got data. This data was already, to some extent, analysed and made sense of. And I think the teams are really on board here on the port with the whole... I won't name examples, but sometimes in industry you find that people don't have this kind of mindset when we're talking about all these things, but all the teams that we've spoken to have this kind of vision of, yes, we understand what you want to do, and yes, we've measured a few things that can help you, and here's what we've done, here's a few reports. So I think there's already momentum in terms of the teams here at the port that we kind of use to our benefits as well.
And just to build on that, Harris, it seems like the data itself and the platform has created a bit of a harmonisation of language across the port estate in different operations, different teams. kind of aligning the culture almost to go in the same direction. But I wondered if I could just ask you, Ian, it's quite a complicated tool. So what are the kind of ongoing support will Siemens offer to make sure that's, you know, ingrained within the infrastructure within the port?
Well, first off, the tool will be maintained for for a period of time, and then we've been discussing recently around about going through some sort of training regimes to be able to identify how people can access the tool, to be able to understand what it currently does, and then we've already had discussions around about its progression, around about how it's likely to link to operational teams. How we're starting to be able to build in the detail about what can be added and supplemented. To the tool, or to the platform itself, to allow the port to consider differences in their operations.
Thank you. That's great. We've got a 5G based question here. If your modelling is in the cloud, is there consideration for the 5G and edge computing to speed up that analysis? Maybe take that one.
Yeah, it's a key thing. As with anything, and I think I mentioned it in my slides, there will always be technology changes. So we've based the evidence on the solutions that we've got at the minute around about technology that is ready and where technology readiness is high. So we're also shifting forward in terms of the adoption of any other different types of technologies that can enhance a platform's operation or the operations within the port environment, and also security. So 5G also adds different layers of security, where you have and resilience and redundancy comes into play, where you have fast-acting networks and quicker responses. Now there's also the element of around about what happens within the cloud and then on the grid edge as well. So 5G will enable that transition to maybe avoid the need for some grid edge processing, but there's also the case that in some instances, especially where you're dealing with constraints on power networks and issues, is that you may need to have sub-second response times, to be able to deal with load shedding or power shifting within networks, and to be able to advise around what you do to be able to dispatch energy from maybe energy storage devices, or to curtail renewable generation or loads, that sit on the site. So that's physically not possible in the cloud with 4G or 5G. Likely neither, because you need to be able to upload the data to the cloud, to be able to process it, to be able to go through some analysis, to be able to dispatch your outputs, and then to be able to feed it back out to the field. So in those instances, grid edge processing will be required to be able to operate the safety critical elements that sit within the port environment, especially when we start to deal with how high power demanding consuming products. This is just the physical nature of electricity. When things get exciting, they get exciting very quickly, and we need to avoid that by having proper processes and machines in place to be able to deal with that.
Thank you, Ian. Another question around dissemination. How will the blueprint be shared with other regional ports and indeed wider ports across the UK? Don't know whether maybe point that towards Tom.
Yeah, so I think, and Howie, maybe you know what's going on with it as well, but I think certainly the idea is to promote them through our networks. I think at Port of Tyne, I think you'll be hosting it as well between the partners. So one of the things we're very keen to do as well, because there is a little bit of a gap with Clean Maritime 2 coming, is make sure all these conversations keep going. Yep. So throughout the year, we're already talking together with us and the port about how we keep that momentum going in across quite a different few ways. I mean, the world's opening up again, so we have lots of opportunities to get back out, talking to people, seeing who would our friends be next time we want to do something. Yeah. So as well as sharing that knowledge and having other stakeholders benefit from it, I think as an engagement tool as well, to see people who are sharing similar challenges and have potential solutions that can plug into it, it's a very powerful thing that we should be actively using.
Yeah, and just say I lead on the North East Energy Catalyst, and certainly I'll be looking for new funding opportunities to bring the consortium back together, because we have a really good consortium that has delivered. So Howie, anything you'd like to add to that, or anything?
Yeah, I mentioned already, we'll welcome any feedback on this to further refine the roadmap before we publish this on platforms, host whichever platform we design. We also welcome potentially comms partners to get this wider, to have better outreach to across the UK.
Okay, and just a final couple of questions, chaps. You're almost, you can almost step away from this radiator.
That's warm.
How will you support tenants to be greener? And could you share the power? For example, Equinor's new net zero base for Dogger Bank will generate power that could be stored. So how will you support your tenants to be greener? I think for you, Ian.
My way. So yes, obviously the adoption of green energy and green practices is going to be a collaborative effort across the whole port estate. Our initial investigations into the likes of solar power and wind power have been focused solely on our own operations. That's duly down to the cost, the current cost of battery storage. So we can capture the energy and use it, but the storage and the sale back to the grid doesn't have the same kind of benefits. We expect those costs to normalise within the next few years, and once we can cost effectively store the electricity that we generate internally, then we'll be able to share it with the tenants, including the Equinor site at the far edge of the dock estate.
Brilliant, thank you.
Can I add?
Yeah, please go.
Maybe just in terms of the platform's development, it's been in a very port-centric nature, but it's an aggregated platform that takes metered energy outputs and then enables that to have the owned port ecosystem in its viewpoint currently. There's obviously tenants that sit within the port environment that are generally energy black holes, right? That are there currently. And there's an opportunity just to be able to work with them, depending on their own appetite and their ambitions, to be able to become net zero themselves, to be able to embrace those within the digital platform as it currently exists within the port ecosystem. But then also, as we, like a satellite view or a rocket ship, if you zoom up another layer, then you can start to be able to address what happens across the whole of the northeast, North and South Tyne sides, what happens, in and offshore, and these different types of environments that happens all the way along down the riverbank and maybe further afield. So there's lots of opportunities just to be able to support other tenants and stakeholders to be able to participate.
Can I add something as well? I mean, I don't know, it might be a bit radical, but just get the data out there and kind of do a top 10 green tenants thing, and people will start coming. Yeah, exactly, and say, because a lot of people are sensitive, especially in the area, about air quality as such, and get businesses to come in and invest and decarbonize processes in the port by making the data that we get available show these beautiful maps, heat maps, if you like, of CO2 emissions in the port, and say, here, I've got a problem. University, city councils come in and help me decarbonize this kind of pocket.
The league table of sustainability.
Yeah, and award people. Yeah. I mean, we've done projects before with customer behavior, awarding this kind of, and we've seen that people sometimes are very responsive. So,
lovely leverage to my next question. Nice link. With more access to data, there will inevitably be behaviour change in a good way, as Laura Brown's pointed out. How can you capture that and influence and reward good practice? And I'll just ask you to continue that thread for us, Harris. You brought it up.
Yeah, well, how do you reward good practice? I don't know. I mean, I'm an academic. Sometimes I take for granted that good practice is awarded, but I'm sure there are all sorts of incentive mechanisms that someone can. I think good practice is awarded on its own. I mean, there's an opportunity for growth, for investment, for taking businesses a step further, and we've seen working with industry that for example, we used to when I started talking about battery storage and all these things, they were super expensive, and industry wouldn't approach it. And then because of the popularity it gained, we've seen businesses grow and starting to adopt energy storage and making the business case. So I think sometimes that you inspire change and growth happens. Yeah. So I'm not very sure that every time we need to say, okay, here's £1,000, become greener, and that might not be the best
Can I add just
way.
something?
Yeah, just first, Howie did have his hand up prior to that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think it's good to have these questions coming in around cultural change because I think immediate steps is showcasing the insights, the value the data has, so it's even from a proof of concept perspective, and so they encourage others to see the real benefits from having more access to data, but recognizing this is going to be a transformational change required, and there is no current best practice. Me and Tom talked about there's also different countries have different cultural practices as well, and how they operate as a port, and then it's the change in mindset will be based on the port's nature and where they're based.
Thank you. Yep.
No, I was just saying, I was just thinking, there's many different mechanisms that you could put in place. A digital platform could support that in terms of being able to capture and to be able to assess and to be able to characterize different customers in terms of like the levels of opportunities that they can do themselves. But there's also one of the things in terms of like the rewards where they ask and the rewards should be relatively clear really from the outputs of the blueprint, is that we're talking about a platform that enables accelerated decarbonisation and cost control within an environment. So many customers that we talk to, inherently they have their sustainability agendas and their own policies for energy that they want to be able to consider. They all want to be able to address about how they go from today to a net zero future. Where there's a little bit of ambiguity is around about sort of the pathway to actually achieve that. So the outputs of this type of project give that clarity around about what a pathway to decarbonisation actually looks like. In a port environment, it's about the electrification of cargo handling and shorter ship power. In a different environment, it could be sort of like the electrification of some sort of production environment. But from there, maybe the reward that comes from a project like this is the ability for a company, regardless of where they are, to be able to address what they can actually do to achieve net zero. And there is no better reward.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. We'll draw a line there. I'll allow you now to take a step away from the radiator. And thank you very much, everyone, for the questions, and online as well, everybody who's joining us. I'll now hand over to Ian Blake, who will close the session with some closing remarks. So thank you very much.
Hello everyone, me again. They're certainly getting the money's worth out of me today. So I'd like to just thank everybody for coming, pass on my thanks, especially to the members of the consortium. I want to reserve a special thanks for our unsung hero of the day, which is Sanjeev, who I think is hiding at the back of the room. Sanjeev is our project manager from the Connected Places Catapult and has kept us all on the straight and narrow, keep making sure that the monitoring officer was happy with our progress and making sure that we're all correct with finances, etc. I want to pass on my personal thanks to James Wright at the back of the room and Eleni at the front, both members of our Port of Tyne environmental team who have been immensely helpful to me, keeping me on the straight and narrow and assisting with the data collection. I would have been lost without the pair of you. Thank you very much. Again, thanks to all the consortium members, the speakers and the wider team, and special thanks to the comms teams who have helped bring today together. Special mention to Nicola from the North East LEP. Unfortunately, Nicola couldn't be here today. She's self-isolating, but she is watching from home. Hello, Nicola. Thank you very much for bringing this all together. And to Marianne at the back of the room from the Port of Tyne. Thank you both. And a final thanks to everybody in the room. Thank you very much for making the effort to come here. I know everybody's very busy at the minute, so taking time out of your busy schedules to come and visit us. And thank you very much to everybody at home as well, watching on the live stream. Thank you very much. I hope you found it a useful and interesting day. Thank you. So for those of you that have signed up for the port tour, Marianne is at the back of the room. If you make yourself known to her, there are a few places left on the bus if anybody hasn't signed up and is interested in going on the tour. The consortium members will be around for a bit longer if you want to have a chat. There's the opportunity for networking. If you want to have a chat with us, that would be fantastic. Thank you all very much.